It's recording.
Alright, cool. Don't say anything stupid.
No, it's serious.
Yeah, maybe I just, if I don't...
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, maybe.
Very good. Alright, so let's switch. So I don't know if you want to try to go and find some chairs, because it's got to be a quite long day, this. So to be standing up will be kind of tiring.
Okay,
so if you find some chairs that you can fit in here, that will be probably good for you.
I can stand this.
Yeah.
Otherwise, do I have another one over here? It's okay.
No, I think it's fine.
Just keep wandering that one now.
Okay. Nobody wants. Alright, shall we start? So welcome. So my name is Peter. I work for a company called Micromedic. Micromedic, we are the official partner of Leica Microsystems here in Sweden. So we take care of all the support, sales, service, and everything. So from now on, if you ever need anything concerning this one, or also if you have general microscopy questions for other things, feel free to contact us, and we will help you out. I will leave some cards here, so you have some contact details and so on. So today we'll go through the training of this system, and we'll start by going through the hardware, and then we'll spend quite a lot of time in the software. And towards the end of the day, we'll also hopefully be able to have a look at your own samples a little bit and try to set up some experiment with those. That will be helpful for you going forward. But in the beginning, I will use my samples just so that I don't destroy yours for the training. What's your own experience with microscopy? Have you used a lot of microscope
Well,
imaging?
I used some,
Yeah.
some system, but not Leica.
Okay, so Leica is new?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, it's new for me.
Yeah, I had a few different, but always just for like a short internship.
Yeah, okay.
So there and there a little bit.
I understand. So I will go through some of the basics of microscopy also when we go through the microscope before we jump over into the software. All right. My idea is that we will try to work until lunchtime. We'll probably have a short break so we can get a bit of air, have to get a bit of stuff in these rooms. But we'll break for lunch somewhere around 11:45 or something like that, and then we'll continue the afternoon. Right?
Okay.
There will be a lot of information. I mean, now you're recording this, so that's good for you because you can always go back to it. Yeah, and I will also show you some things in the software that will also be helpful for you, so if things are not sticking immediately. Cool. All right, so let's start talking about the hardware and so on. This a little bit. So we have the microscope. This is an inverted microscope. It's the DMI-8 from Leica. So the microscope you have it here, and then over here we have two boxes. The lower one is the control box, electronics and so on for the microscope. And the top one here is the light source. So this is the fluorescence light source. It's a cooled light source, PE4000. So it is one of these multi-line light sources. So we'll come back to that when we look at the software also. One thing with the light source, apart from turning it on, this is I think the only thing that I will really stress when it comes to light source. So the light source itself, they're all in here. This one has several small light sources. They're all in here. And the light travels through this guy here. I don't know if you can see it. It comes here also. So it goes from the light source, goes around, comes in here. This one is a liquid light guide. And this is a sensitive thing. So it has a liquid crystal inside, so you can break it quite easily if you're not careful. So you shouldn't bend it too much, and you shouldn't crush it. So both of those will break the liquid crystal, and you will have much worse transmission in the light guide. So this one, you should always be careful. Make sure that it's nice and free, and no sharp bends. So right now I put it around this one, coming up into here. So just be careful of that. And if by accident you do break it or something like that, it's not gonna break the bank. Better to speak up than to just like, okay, let's just leave it, no one saw me. So if something happens like that, speak up, and then you can have a look and see if you think that it broke. The way you would notice that is if, for example, if you're starting to do imaging and you're realizing I need much longer exposure times where I previously didn't need it, that would indicate perhaps something's wrong with this one, so you don't get the same amount of light through. But yeah, so it is actually sort of a consumable. We do recommend it, changing it every once in a while. Now though, with the LEDs, they tend to work basically forever if they don't break. So just be careful with that. All right.
Okay.
Cool. The microscope itself. I'm gonna go through the different parts. So we're gonna talk a little bit about microscopy and microscopes in general here. We can start from the top. So on the microscope we have transmitted light, and on this one we also have fluorescence. So the transmitted light will come from here. So this is the transmitted light arm. Back here we have the light source, it's an LED. It will shoot light through this guy here, which sends the light to the condenser, which is down here. All of these parts are manual, and we will see what the manual controls, what they do, because it's also something that I don't think you will need to use them very much, but it's good because some people might play around with them, so it's good to recognize when someone has done that, so you can correct it afterwards. Condenser down here, the condenser's job is to basically focus the light on the sample. And again, so being you can tilt this back so you get better access. So the two controls we have here is up here. We have a field diaphragm that you can move back and forth. We'll see what it does in a bit. And we have also an aperture here which you can move back and forth. So we'll also see what that one does once we start looking at the sample. Because these are two settings that you can use to optimize your image for transmitted light. But only for transmitted light. For the rest it doesn't really matter. Okay, below we have the stage. This is a motorized stage. So this one you will be able to do automated stage experiment, as we call it, like multi-positions, tile scans and so on. And since it's a motorized stage, you do control it with this little guy, which is the remote control. You use these two to control it. When you start the system up, you will see it. It will initialize. It means that it will go to different points to just get references. So before starting this one up, you should always make sure that, yes, nothing is obstructing it. I don't have a objective sticking up or something like that. If you're worried about that, I tend to set it for the 5x objective. That's a low magnification objective. It also has a long working distance, so make sure that nothing is sticking up. We'll see that once we turn this on. Below we have the objective turret. This is a manual objective turret, so you simply just move it around to the objective that you want. Has a little stop. Sometimes in some positions, the weight of the objective makes it so that you just have to make sure that it stops in the right position, otherwise it will just continue. The whole system is coded, you will see that, so even though you move things manually, the system will know which setting you have and which objective you have. We can continue down. We have in here, this is a little thing you can remove. It is there, it's sticking there with magnets. And in here we have our filter cubes. We can also move this one manually to just get the filter cubes so we can see them. So here we have filter cube. In this one we have two filter cubes. They are both multi-band pass cubes, meaning that in this case they are both quad cubes, so they work for 4 different fluorophores. We'll also have a look at that because there are some things you need to consider when you work with these kind of cubes. So we'll come back to that when we start looking at the samples and so on. A filter cube you can remove like this on the DMI-8. They are magnetically held in place, so they are very easy to take out and put in. It looks like this. So I don't know if you have seen a filter or looked at a filter cube before, but they all have the same construction. They might have different casings, but they look like this. So they all come with an excitation filter. So this filter right there, that's where the light from the light source comes in. In here, there's a dichroic mirror at an angle. So this dichroic mirror works so that light with a shorter wavelength will be reflected. So it will come in here, hit that mirror like this, and short wavelength will be reflected up. And it will go up towards through the objective and into the sample. So it will hit the sample will fluoresce, so you will have emission light coming back down the same way. And then this dichroic mirror will let through longer wavelength. So those wavelength emission is always going to be at a longer wavelength than the excitation light. So that will go through the dichroic mirror, and then it will go through the emission filter that is in the back, in the bottom there. So that's basically the filter cube. So you have 2 of those in here. There's 6 positions, so you can have more. And it's something that you will need to consider for the future. We did talk quite a lot about these multi-band pass versus single band pass and so on. So if you do experience some challenges with the multi-band pass, you might have to add 1 or 2 single band pass at some point in time. Or if you get other fluorophores, special fluorophores, you might need to add. But then it's quite simple. They would come like this, and you would simply find the position, you slide them in, they lock into place, and then you can just close the hatch. And on this one, we would go into the software, and we would add that cube to the software so that the system knows that it has a new cube. Okay, so that's the filter in there. We have a few controls. We can come back to these controls after when we start up the system. Focus, coarse focus is the inner one, fine focus, outer one. And we have these 2 levers here. So these ones are important to know. The top one, so when we started discussing this microscope, there was one specification that said it couldn't be too long. Because I think the plan was to have it positioned in the different direction. So on this one, you see back here, I have this little black box here. This is the fluorescence axis. This one is sticking into something called an infinity port, so it's a connection to the microscope. On this specific microscope, we actually have 2 of those connections. One in the back, making this long, but we also have one on this side, which you can't see, that would make the whole system much shorter. Since we have it like this now, I placed it in the back. And this one here will direct where the light is coming from. So this one out will direct the light from the back towards the sample. If I push this in, it will be the one on the side. So if you're ever here and you're trying to do fluorescence, you get no light, just have a quick look so that this one is out. Pushing it in, what it does, it puts basically a little mirror in the light path that will just mirror the light coming from this side in. by pulling it out, you pull the mirror out so that the light is coming straight through from the back. Okay? This one here is the camera port. You have a little sign here that shows what it does. So if you push it in, I get the light to the eyepieces. If I pull it out, I get the light to the camera. So that is also coded, so the system will know where the light goes. But again, if you are taking images, you need to remember to pull that out. Okay? Cool, we're almost done. On the other side, which you can't see, but we'll rotate and you can have a look at it and so on. This is where we have the camera port. It's on this side, and the camera. So this one has a scientific CMOS camera. So it's a very sensitive and very good monochrome camera for fluorescence. So we'll see the advantages of that one once we start the software and so on. But that's on this side. It has a USB cable going to the computer. So that's the only cable. There is no on and off on the camera. It takes the power from the USB. On this side, it looks very similar to this. You have a focus knob, the same on this side, but then you have some other controls for some of the light features here. So we'll have a quick look at those. Most people don't use so much the buttons on the microscope on these sides, because most people using this, they will use the software for doing things anyway. But we will have a look and we will go through some of the functions if you are sitting at the microscope and you want to work. Last but not least, on this one, you can have a few different things. On this one we have buttons with LEDs. So these ones corresponds to all the objective positions as well as filter positions. So on the left side here, we have the objective positions. So the objective turns is manual. So these buttons will not do anything if you press them, but they will show which objective is active. You will see that with a little LED lighting up, and that's because it's coded. On the other side, we have the filter cubes, and these are also labeled. So we have cube 1 and cube 2, and then we have the bright field position. These are motorized, so here you can just press these buttons to go to them. These little stickers that I put here, there are more stickers if you ever change anything. And for the cubes that you have here, the two quad cubes, there wasn't any sticker with the proper names. So I just put cube 1 and cube 2. If you want to, you can of course take this away. You can write something here also if you want. That would make more sense to you. But right now it's just cube 1, cube 2. Alright. Last thing on the microscope itself is the tube. So this is where you have the eyepieces. This one can be adjusted to your eyes. So that's basically it. And these are the eyepieces. One thing with the eyepieces that most people seem to not use very often is that this one you can adjust the focus basically. So you see here in the middle there's a metal line here. That's sort of the default position. And then if I have different eyesight to be able to see sharp, if I have these both, so now they will be the same. But if I have different eyesight, I would start by focusing the system with my dominant eye. So I would just close my other eye, focus the microscope, and then I would switch eye. Instead of, I would focus the microscope using these, and then I would switch eyes, and I would use this to focus it for my other eye, to get sharp for both eyes. So that's how you use these. Most people, they don't use this very much because most people don't sit at the microscope looking in the eyepieces. But it's good to know because very often when I come to a microscope, these will be either all the way in or all the way out, just because people are turning them a little bit and then they end up in the extreme positions. And at that point, especially if they are differently set, you might feel like you're not getting a sharp focus in the microscope. But it's good to know that these ones will do that. I don't know if anyone is working with their glasses on, but these little eye cups, they come off. So if you are using glasses, you might want to take these off so that you can get to it properly. Cool. Any questions so far? Fairly straightforward. That's good. So I will turn on the system right now. So on this system we have basically three things that we need to turn on. The order doesn't really matter. We have the light source up here, little button. I will turn that on. So this is the light source coming on, and then on the electronic box you can see when you sit here there's a little on and off button down here. So you'll turn that on. That turns on the microscope. So turning on the microscope now, it will start to initialize. The stage is initializing, so this is the movement that it will do. So we'll find its endpoints, and it will go back to the middle. And then the third thing is the computer. The computer is on right now, but it's a computer, so the button is the one that is lit there. If it's dark in here, some people they put a little sticker or something to see the button a bit better, but it's the one that is lit. That's the on-off button. So I set it up this way. I mean, this is a small room, so I felt like this works sort of okay. It might be better than to have it. It would also fit to have the microscope, so I would be sitting here, but maybe you prefer like this so that you're not in the way here. You can move this around as you want. Now everything is put together, so just to sort of turn things and so on, that's perfectly fine to do. The only thing, be careful with liquid Leica. Yeah. So the software has... So the software has two users. I don't know the way you will use this in the future. Right now this is not on the network. Our recommendation is to put it on the network. Because if it is on the network, you can also make sure that Windows is updated for security reasons and so on. And it also allows us to help you easier. So we tend to try to do more remote support. So if you have issues and you're sitting at a microscope, or there is a new type of experiment that you want to do and you're not really sure how to do it, you can always contact us. And our first line of help would be to set up a remote support where we take control of the computer and the microscope together with you. So then we'll walk through the issue you're having, or we're walking through the new experiment you want to do. Or we troubleshoot, if you have some issues, that it's easier for us to troubleshoot by taking control of the microscope. So if you put it online, you can also have login from KI using your own login and so on. That will work perfectly fine. But right now you have two accounts here. You have the Leica admin and the Leica user. The Leica user is okay for everything that you will do. Right now the password for that is Leica. It's also written there. 1, 2, 3, and exclamation mark. So you have the password here. Feel free to change the password. You can also remove these accounts if you want, and have your own. The only thing, the computer should always have an admin, someone with an admin account, because we need admin access for some of the things that we need to do with the system. For all the use, you can use just a normal account. So right now, this is the local admin account, so if you want, feel free to leave that as it is, because then we can always access the system. Alright. So once, the only thing, so I said to start it up, it doesn't really matter which order you do things. The only thing that matters is that you allow all the hardware to really start up before you start the software. That's the one thing to remember. If you try to start the software when things are not fully initialized and so on, you will probably get an error message. And at that point you just have to start the software again. Software is LSX. The icon is here. So I will start off by just double clicking on this. The first one here, it has a countdown timer. So if you don't do anything, it will continue automatically. I will click on that to stop that timer to show you. So in this first window, if you're going to do imaging, you can just go OK on this standard configuration here. The top one here you should never touch. It only has one option, but it should always be what is written there. The configuration here is the standard configuration. That's for when you want to do imaging, when you want to use the microscope and take pictures. But sometimes you might want to open this up and just look at your images. Work with your images. If that's the case, you can use the offline configuration. Because LSX always needs to have a connection to a microscope for it to work. And the microscope needs to be on, so it can communicate with it. So if you try to start up the standard configuration before starting this microscope, it won't work. It'll give you an error message. But the offline, that's a configuration that has sort of a demo version or emulating a microscope, so that one will run. So that's the only choice you would do here. So most of the time standard configuration, but if you just want to open your images and don't want to turn on anything, you can use the offline. That goes also for the LSX software is something you can install on your own computer, PC. Mac doesn't work, but a PC. Which will allow you to open up your images, work with your images on your own laptop if you want. The software is free. There are 2 ways of getting it, or 3 ways, let's say. So right now, you do have the latest software here. So you can install it from this one. When you install it, there are a few choices you have to make. And there is we have a video on our YouTube channel that gives you some information about those things you need to choose. You can also let me know, and then afterwards you also need to make this hardware configuration to be able to open up so you create your own offline, because if you have it on your computer you won't have anything connected to it, so you need the offline. So there is also some instruction videos for how to set that up. So if you want that, let me know, and I will send you the videos for that. There is also another way on the Leica website. If you just Google LSX Leica, they will point you to the website, and there you can download a light version of the software. That light version will also allow you to open up your images and have a look at them. Benefit with the light version, it is, as the name says, light, so it's smaller for the computer, smaller to run. If you install this, it's a full software, but you will only use a little small part of it. It will be a bit heavier for the computer. But there are some things in the light version that you won't have, that you would have if you installed this one. So it's myself, I run the full version, but yeah, it's up to you. When there are new versions coming out, if you want to update and so on, you can let me know, and I can send you links to when new versions will come out. But this is the newest version for now. Okay, so that's a bunch of things about this first one. So to remember, standard configuration when you want to do imaging, offline if you just want to have a look at your images. Okay. There are a few other things that you can do here, but I won't go into it. And we'll see if it's something that we will use later on or not. So we just go OK. So with that countdown timer, if you started up and you walked away for a little bit, it will continue with the latest settings. So if the person before used offline, it will start up in offline.
Okay.
If the last person used standard, then we'll try to start up in standard configuration. There we go. Do this.
Oh, thanks.
Alright, so this is the standard, and I call it the default interface of LSX. This is how it will always start up when you start up the software. And I think that if you're just taking single images of your sample, you might be in here. But for everything where you're using the stage, and if you're doing tile scans or multipositions or these things, I think you will be in what we call the navigator interface. So that's the interface that is specially designed to work with motorized stages and such. However, those two interfaces, they have a lot of similarities when it comes to the controls of the system. How you set up an experiment, how you set up your different channels and so on. So everything, all of that looks the same. So I tend to start in here when I go through all of these settings because that looks the same in Navigator. So we'll start in here and then we'll move over to Navigator once we have covered the basics of the software, yeah? Okay, so the interface, you have a ribbon here at the top that we'll walk through. You have 3 panes. You have this one, the middle one, and then you have this right one. And then you have some buttons down here. So these are the things that we will walk through now step by step. And we'll start by the simple one up here. It will always start up in Acquire. You will most likely spend about 95% of the time here in Acquire, be it in here or in Navigator. But we'll walk through the other things anyway. So we'll start by going into configuration. So clicking on this one. This is where you can have access to some of the settings of the software, the user interface and so on. Some of the camera preferences. This is some settings that you might want to change, but we can get to these settings in a different position, so you don't need to go into configuration. And we also have some settings for microscope, stage, and so on and so forth in here. And some other settings with memory and so on. So all of these things are set up the way that will most likely be best for you guys. So this means that configuration is a place where you should not need to go in ever, more or less. As it stands right now, the only time when you would want to go in here is if you have added a new filter cube, or if you have added a new objective. And if you have, we can also walk through how to do that at that point. It's not a big deal. Other than that, you shouldn't need to go into configuration. But it's good to know what it is and where you find it. So then we have Acquire again, and we jump to Process. So in Process, this is where you can process images. So here you have a bunch of different things you can do to capture the images already. You can crop them, resize them, merge them, and so on and so forth. Adjust sharpness, colors, and so on also. So a lot of these are available. Some of these are not available because they are license protected. So you need licenses to be able to do things here. For some of these at least. And some of them, like this deconvolution, you don't have licenses, so there is actually nothing under there at all. So you will notice if there is a need for a license or so. But here you can do a bunch of these type of process to your images. And at this point, I like to point to this little guy here. There's a little red dot here. It has an eye for information inside. And you will find this in several places in the software. You see it here. You can also see it there. And you can also see it up here. If I open up this, okay, right now nothing. So we'll see it in other places also. This is a very nice feature of the whole system, and if I click this, it opens up a browser. It doesn't go online, it doesn't need internet for this, it just uses the browser to read a locally stored file. So this is the first time we start this up, so I will just use the recommended settings. So it opens up Internet Explorer, and okay, now that disappeared before I had time to do anything. You have to just push allow bulk content. And when doing that, it opens up the help file where I've clicked this. So I click this in Process Tools. So it opens up the help file in Process Tools. Now I can click my way through here. So here we can see the all these menus. So you can see crop, resize, combine. So that's all of these things. So I can click on this and I can read how this tool works, what I can do with the crop tool. And this goes for basically everything in the software. So the help file is really, really helpful and very, very useful. So I use the help file still for some of the more obscure features, and also some of the quite basic that we rarely go into in these kind of menus. But my point is that use this when you're here. If there is something you want to do and you're not really sure how to do it, if you have managed to find your way to the tool, you can always click on the little eye. If you can't even find where this is, you can always open the help file up here. Log content. And now in here you can search for something. So you can also use the help file like that. I always say, when you sit here, if you have questions, if there is something you're not really sure how to do, if you have colleagues around that are using the microscope and knows the microscope, ask them for help. Then go to the help file, or you could also switch those, start with the help file, then go to colleagues. And if you're still not really sure how to do something, just contact us and we'll help you. Alright, so this is the process tab. You might be in here to do some of these things, potentially. The last one is quantify. In the quantify tab, we can do a few different kind of quantification. I tend to give the example of just drawing a line profile. When you do fluorescence, if you have an image of a cell, you draw a line and you see how the different channels that you acquired, how the intensity changes over that line. So that's a typical quantification tool that is used. But you have a few different different tools here for that type of quantification. And again, you have the little eye, click on that, allow block content, you have tool, and you can read about these tools and how they work. Okay? So I will most likely not go through anything in the process tab and the quantify tab today. I tend to leave that for you to explore if you need it. And if you need it and you need help, let us know and we'll help you. But since there are not so many that uses these tools, I tend to spend my time elsewhere during this training. Okay? Cool. So I will jump back into Acquire. I can also mention then, when we were on this quantification and so on, you have also an analysis license with this purchase. We decided to have that training later, after summer, when people are back. So that's a new software for Leica. It's not a new software on the market because it's a software that has been on the market for several years. It's been developed for many, many years. But it was purchased by Leica recently, and it's called Avia. And Avia is a very, very powerful software. And included here we have a 1-year subscription to their web interface. And the web interface is very convenient because it allows you to access it and work with it from any station if you want, one at a time. So, and you upload your images to there and you work on them online and you can get your analysis out there. So it will be very interesting to see. It's also new to me, so I don't know exactly how it works or all the things you can do. It looks very, very promising, and I think that the analysis that we talked about here is what this one will manage to do for you. But that's all things that we'll come back to when we look at the software, and we'll see what that can be used for you.
So with this software, we cannot really quantify the fluorescence intensity of our cells. So it's possible, but
Yes. So with this software, it's possible to quantify it if you use these kind of things, but that's a very manual thing. So you have to, in this case here, you could circle your cells and you can look at the average intensity inside of there and so on. So very time consuming. So it's not automated at all. The LSX software has an analysis module, but we talked about the analysis that you're doing here and the type of samples you're doing, and that analysis module was not powerful enough to manage that, which is also a reason why Leica decided to, the best way was to purchase this very sophisticated software rather than trying to improve their own analysis software. So that software is a software that, the way I see that it will work, so I can't guarantee this until we actually look at it more, but it will do all the segmentation. If you have your sample with several cells, it will segment out single cells, it will look at the intensity in those cells, give you that as information, and so on and so forth. So this is the whole idea of that software. Should be able to do what you need to do. You can already have a look at it. It's called Avia. It has a lot of very nice videos online, still under the old company and so on. So it's AIVIA, Avia. So there you can get a sense of the things that you can do with this software to sort of whet your appetite for later when we go through it. All right, we'll jump back into Acquire. So this is now where we'll spend some time. Next step, we have these three panes here. We'll start in this window here. In this window is where we will see our images, live images, but also captured images, and we have some tools that we can use here that we'll come back to. The middle one here is where we set up our channels, we control light sources and so on. And over here we are controlling all the other parts of the microscope. And on this microscope, that most of the things are coded, manual coded. We will mainly control the camera over here. This is also where we choose what type of experiments we're going to be doing. So to move forward here, I will load up a sample so we have something there. So for this, let's turn to these two. So with this we have two sample holders. This one for multi-well plates, so we'll use that later. We have this one, which is a universal holder, so these ones slides. They have a little bit of they are not going so easy because they are new, but they will probably slide easier and easier as the more you use it. So these ones you can use for petri dishes and slides and so on. So I'm going to put a slide here. Since this is an inverted sample microscope, I will put the slide upside down, put it down. And with this one, I will simply put it in and then make sure that these ones slides so it sits there nice and snug. This you can of course also do while this sample holder is on the microscope. I will tilt this back. To put this one in, there are a few different ways. I tend to do it like this. I put it on this side. On this here, you have springs. This is where I want to push it into. So I start it there and then I just slide it towards the back. And once I come to the back here, now that this one has initialized, I don't want to move the stage. There are motors, there are engines here that is keeping the stage in place. You see I can't move it. But I can, with force, overpower those motors. And if I do, the stage loses its position and I will need to reinitialize and so on. So when you put this one in, you should try to be careful to slide it in without having the stage move at all. I slide it in like that, and once that is in, it should be flat over here. That's when you know that it's in correctly. Okay. So now we'll use these controls to move the stage so that you can see the stage moving in this direction. So I will just move that so that I am somewhere over my sample. And I have a 5x objective, so overview objective. I have a 20x objective on here. A 20x objective with a higher numerical aperture, so this is a very nice objective, good for doing a lot of your imaging. I think this might be one of the ones used most, actually, as long as you're using cover slipped samples. So this 20x is for samples with cover slip. So if you have a plastic dish or something that is not a cover slip but maybe a thicker plastic bottom or something like that, this one will not work. So for those kind of samples, we have the next one, which is a 40x objective. This is a 40x long working distance objective. This one has a correction color. We will come back to that in a little bit. But this objective will work for both samples with. Sorry. This one will work for both samples with cover slips, as well as for thicker like plastic bottoms and so on. So that's a 40x. And then we have 2 steps to get to the oil immersion objective. So the oil immersion objective, cover slip only, and you need oil. So have you used oil immersion objectives before, or immersion objective in general? Good. So when you use that, you need a little bit of oil. If you're working with a sample like a slide, like this, and you've been in Navigator, we'll see, you will realize what I mean afterwards and why I'm doing this. So to add this, you can do it several ways. You can just remove the sample and put a little drop of oil. Don't be excessive. A small drop will do it. If you're excessive, you just drench this whole thing here. So just one small drop will do it also later. If you have been using the sample and looking at the samples with other objectives, you might not want to disturb the samples. You want it to be in the same position. So the way that I would typically do is either would lower the stage and then I would move there's a little opening here, so you can move the stage over there and add it. But I tend to also just angle it out like this, put a little drop, and then slowly just let it slide back into place. Very important when using oil. Immersion objectives, they are perfectly fine with oil. Dry objectives are very not okay with oil. The 40x objective is a long working distance objective, so unless you put a lot of oil, that should not really touch the oil. It should not be a risk for it. It would always be. But the 20x is a short working distance, so it will be very close to your cover slip. So it means that you can get oil on this. If you looked at your sample with the oil immersion and you think, okay, I just want to have a quick look with the dry, like a bigger field of view, not a good idea, because you risk getting oil on the dry objectives. And if you do, worst case scenario, those will need to be replaced completely by a new objective. Very expensive. Best is if that happens, an accident can happen, you should clean it as soon as possible and as thoroughly as possible. Preferably even remove the objective from the turret, take it out and really clean it with ethanol. So that you should do as fast as possible. If you let it really sit there, then it can start to creep into the object, and this is when it's bad. Okay? So in general, once you have gone to the immersion objective, never go back until you remove your sample and clean your sample. After using oil immersion, you should always clean the objective as well. The worst thing for oil immersion objective is to leave the oil on there so that it really dries in. Then it will need a deep cleaning to be able to work. Cleaning, ethanol is what I would recommend. So to have a little bottle with ethanol, preferably pure ethanol. And I would also recommend getting some of these optical wipes, so a little bit better than these Gimtic that you have up there. So So this is a recommendation to buy that and have that here for when you use it. So always, when you use the oil immersion, remember to clean it properly afterwards. Okay? Alright. So let's go back to this sample now. So,
Wait, let me just restart the camera.